This is True News, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help us God. I'm Rick Wiles. Today is Friday, February 16, 2024. We are living in surreal times. I can't look back to any time in my life or even historically when reality was so weird. It would help if I could peer into history and point to an age when the abnormal became normal. If I could identify such an age, then I could study how the people coped with it and got through it and eventually grew out of it. But I can't find anything in history comparable to our age. I don't even know where to start in describing our culture and times. The West has entered World War III with Russia. Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinian people. The president of the USA is senile. The new standard for possession of classified documents is whether or not you were too old to remember removing the documents and keeping them. If you remember it, you will go to prison. If you don't remember it, you get to stay in the White House. Men are transitioning to women and women transitioning to men. Schools are hiding from parents that their children are changing genders. Transvestites are reading books to elementary school-age children in libraries. The southern border has been eliminated. Millions of people from over 160 nations have crossed the border in the past year with the support and encouragement of the federal government. And the largest ethnic group crossing the border are Chinese citizens, especially military-age young men. And every attempt to reestablish the border is vehemently opposed by America's ruling class. Well, I could go on and on. Abnormal has become normal. I thought it would be a good time to check in with Dr. Chuck Baldwin in Montana to get his analysis of the strange times we are in today. Dr. Baldwin is the founder and pastor of Liberty Fellowship in Kalispell, Montana. The church's website is libertyfellowshipmt.com. MT for Montana, libertyfellowshipmt.com. And Dr. Baldwin's personal website is chuckbaldwinlive.com. So it's always an honor for Doc Burkhart and I to welcome Chuck Baldwin back to True News. He's on the phone from his home in Kalispell. Chuck, good to hear from you again.
Thank you so much for letting me come on your program.
Chuck, how are the people of Montana evaluating the weirdness of the age that we're living in?
I think overall, we would be probably typical with the rest of the country when in generalities. Montana is different in a lot of ways. We are much more independent-minded. The state itself has a very independent-minded streak about it. It values its wide open spaces, its big sky, it's hunting and it's fishing and it's in wild country and 1 million people, a little over, populating the fourth largest state in the country geographically. So it's a rural state for the most part. The values of the people here are pretty traditional overall. A lot of the liberal California evacuees are going all over the West, and some of them are finding their way to Montana, which is, makes life difficult for every local citizenry that has to accept these people. They want to leave the high taxes and they want to save their money from the government of California that's stealing them blind with high taxation, but they want to carry their liberal socialist communist values with them to whatever state they go to. And so we're dealing with a little bit of that, not as much as Colorado and some of the other states, but for the most part, we are a conservative state. We do have one Democrat senator who's been in office for a long time. His office, I think, is in jeopardy this term. We'll see how that runs. But on the issues themselves, as far as the national issues, what you see in Florida is probably going to be pretty much what you see here. You got a big Trump fan base among the conservatives and the evangelicals. Mr. Biden is despised, as he is in most of the country. As far as the issues that you raised, Montana is vehemently opposed to the border being open. In fact, our governor, Gianforte, has just announced that he's preparing to send National Guardsmen from the state of Montana to the border of Montana. There's a lot of states, of course, that are doing that, especially in the West, and our state is one of those. As far as the other issues, it would be very similar. I think personally, as far as our domestic issues are concerned, the border is the number one issue confronting the United States. That is, without a doubt, the most dangerous and precarious situation that we're going to be dealing with, not just in 2024, but for many, many years to come. These gang members that are coming across the border are organizing. My son was a police officer down there in the state of Florida, and he told me not too long ago, Dad, you would not believe the amount of gang-related human trafficking that's taking place right under our noses here in this country. And here just recently, we've discovered that the Mexican drug cartels and human traffickers have moved into the Indian reservations on the state of Montana, about 6 of them. And they are setting up shop on the reservations, which is fertile ground for the drug cartels, and are wreaking havoc. There's several things that are in play here when we talk about that, just to kind of let people know why that's such fertile ground. Mm-hmm. Because the Indian reservations are under the authority of the federal government, not the state government or the county government in which they exist. So therefore, the law enforcement personnel that are present or absent is more the operative word. And the Indian reservations are the responsibility of the federal government. And the feds just refuse to provide adequate law enforcement for the reservations, which makes them easy fodder for the gangs that come in. And so a lot of the men in the Indian reservations have actually formed vigilante committees themselves to try and fight off the drugs. So, I mean, that's going on right here in our state.
Wow.
And I guarantee you that if anybody who has a population center of more than 60, 75,000, 800,000 people has organized gang activity going on inside their community right now. That's, if you haven't heard about it, it's because it's been hushed up, but it's going on.
Chuck, I said the other day that for conservatives, the thing that they don't get is the issue is no longer about whether we should close the border. The issue is whether we should reestablish a border. The ruling class eliminated the border a long time ago. They have no intention. It's not an issue, well, should we close the border? The ruling class, their issue is, should we have a border? And you know the globalists for many, many years wanted to eliminate borders, and they did it.
Well, that's been their goal for decades. And we remember whenever G.W. Bush was president, he tried to open the southern border then. And back at that time, It was the governor of Texas at the time and the governor of Oklahoma at the time who stood up strongly and gave such opposition that temporarily it closed because obviously many of the conservative Republicans fought back against Bush for that effort. But of course, Bush has been a globalist his entire life, as was his dad. So that was an attempt that was made at the early part of this century. But now with Biden in the White House, Obama started it as a Democrat, but with Biden in the White House, I mean, this man is a fanatic. He's absolutely possessed, and he has made it his, I think, number one policy domestically to bring in as many illegals as possible. And the reason for that is pretty clear. They want as many millions of illegals in this country as they can to ensure that the Democrats will never lose another national election. They give all these illegal immigrants the right to vote, which they do. They get a voting card as soon as they come in, along with their cell phones and their Medicaid and Medicare and all the other benefits that they get as soon as they come in the border. They get the voting cards, so they're able to vote in the elections, and they're counting on the fact that all these millions and millions of illegal aliens are going to vote Democrat, which most of them will, the ones that vote, and that they will never lose another election. That's what this is all about. And they could not care less how many murderers and rapists and drug dealers and gang members are coming across the border. They just don't care. And one interesting thing, I'll see how you take this and let your audience mull this over a little bit. The number one trademark of the cartels, and when you say cartels, you're talking about two basic criminal activities. You're talking about drug dealing and you're talking about human trafficking. Those go together. They almost don't have one without the other. So when the cartels begin operating in areas, one of the first things that they start doing, and this is their trademark globally, when you go down to the third world countries, this is a daily occurrence. I mean, this is not even given a second thought because it happens so often. But their trademark is they behead and dismember their victims. And of course, they do this while the victims are still alive. They don't kill them first. They die somewhere in the process of having their head cut off or their limbs cut off. Somewhere in that process, they'll pass away. But that's their trademark. Okay, so I got curious about that, and I started doing a search of information to see if I could find if we had beheadings here in the United States. And I found two instances. Both of these occurred after Biden became president and after he began opening the borders. The first one was in Minnesota, and the second one was in California. Both of those, of course, are Democrat, open border, sanctuary city states. But there were media reports in those two states of illegals. Both of the instances, the perpetrators were illegals that engaged in beheading of their victims. So I got to looking around. I could not find any other reports, which I found a little bit odd. And I really believe, guys, that the mainstream media is deliberately concealing the beheadings and dismemberments that the gang members are perpetrating from the American people. You got to know that there's more than two that have taken place since all this has been going on since 2021. Mm-hmm. We're 3 years plus into this, and millions of illegals, tens of thousands of gang members setting up shop here in the United States. And there's more than two beheadings that have taken place. But the media will not report it. They don't want the American people to know about this, because if the American citizenry discovered this was going on in any kind of a mass scale, they would rise up with such anger that I believe that they would be able to stop it, and the federal government would not have the ability to continue. So they're concealing that. And of course, I can't prove it because I can't find the news sources, but my common sense tells me there's not just two of these instances that have taken place over the last 3+ years. There's been probably many dozens that have taken place, and that's going to keep escalating as these cartels are able to enlarge themselves and organize. They are an extremely effective criminal organization. They are as organized as any Italian mafia in New York City or Chicago. They are organized. They are ruthless. They are expansive in ways that multiply so quickly and so far that law enforcement has a very difficult time keeping up with them. As my policeman son was sharing with me not too long ago.
I'm sure you remember. I'm sure you remember Barack Obama and his Fast and Furious program, where the Justice Department shipped high-powered rifles to Mexico and gave them to the drug cartels.
I do remember that indeed.
And
the
I,
AR-15s. Yeah.
Yes, I said Obama is arming the army that's going to fight Americans. And he got away with it, but he was shipping large numbers of rifles to Mexico and deliberately giving them to the drug cartels. And
the drug cartels.
And he wasn't impeached for it. He wasn't held accountable for it. And so now we have Obama's in his third term. He's behind the curtains running Joe Biden, and the border has been eliminated. And the largest ethnic group crossing the border into Texas are Chinese, in particular, young, fighting-age Chinese men.
Right.
And so it's obvious there's a Trojan horse that's entered the country. And at a given moment, when a signal is given, they will take up arms. We will have a multi-million-man army inside the country. We will be already invaded when the war starts.
And Rick, to add insult to injury to that, earlier this week we reported on a story, Sheriff Rick Jones out of Butler County, Ohio, said in a briefing from federal officials that the Chinese had safe houses in all 50 states of the country.
Yeah, Chuck, I don't know if you know about this. Butler County, Ohio sheriff came back from the National Sheriff's Association convention in Washington. They had been addressed by FBI Director Wray and some other federal officials who alerted the sheriffs of the security threats. But one of the FBI officials told the sheriffs, what Doc just said was, the Chinese have safe houses in all 50 states to receive the Chinese illegal immigrants.
Incredible.
And the FBI knows about it, and they don't shut it down.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. And that's the thing. And so the federal government has become the facilitator of everything that we've been talking about right now. We have to recognize that our federal government has had a coup take place, and the federal government no longer works for the American people. It works for foreign interests.
Yes.
And I believe that we have to recognize that just about everything emanating from Washington, D.C. today is treasonous. I mean, we know it's unconstitutional, illegal, immoral, unethical, all those things, but I would use the word treasonous. I mean, you mentioned the Biden situation where that, he was plainly found, the evidence was incontrovertible, that he had documents that he wasn't supposed to have, top secrets, et cetera, all the things that Trump was accused of. that he had and had for many years, and he knew it. And they got the evidence on him, and obviously that is an offense that should be not just a political ramification, such as being purged from office, but also a legal ramification. He should be facing jail time. And as you alluded to, the report said that, he's no doubt the evidence is there that he's guilty of this, and we don't doubt that. But his age and his senility is so bad that nobody would prosecute him in a court of law. So we won't do anything to him. So in other words, he's not competent enough to stand trial for criminal activity in front of a jury, but he's competent enough to be the president of the United States, which makes him the most powerful political figure in the world.
And the commander-in-chief with the launch codes.
Exactly. So that another indication of what I'm saying is that everything out of Washington, D.C. is practically treasonous, and it doesn't stop. And I think that the problem, the real problem, and this is the thing where you and I have talked about before, and I know you get this, and Doc and your program talks about this kind of stuff every day. You're one of the bright spots in the country, frankly, of disseminating the truth about what I'm about to broach here. But let's face it, none of this could happen in the United States without the tacit support, if not enthusiastic support, of America's evangelicals.
You got that right.
When you look at what's going on in Gaza, it is the humanitarian crisis of the 21st century. This is a Holocaust. It is a genocide in the true sense of the word. The criminality, the bloodlust, the unspeakable crime against humanity that has taken place since October by the Israeli forces against mostly unarmed, innocent women and children in Gaza is unconscionable. It defies human comprehension. It is a war crime unlike we have seen in generations. And yet the evangelical Christians, including the pastors, not only yawn and have no reaction whatsoever, totally indifference and apathy on their part. The ones that do speak in support of the genocide.
Yes.
And they use the Bible as justification.
Yes.
It defies imagination, actually. And I have preached on this, I've taught on this, and I've written on this. And the reaction I get from the vast majority of evangelicals is, well, they're God's chosen people. We're supposed to support them no matter what they do. They're God's chosen people. This Christian Zionism, Schofieldism, Darbyism, futurism, call it whatever you will, has warped not only the thinking but the hearts of a generation of evangelical Christians, to the point that they can no longer discern between good and evil,
right,
between right and wrong. It's. Let me give you a quote. This is Gideon Levi is Haaretz columnist, newspaper in Israel, probably the leading newspaper, and he's been the newspaper's deputy editor. He's won many prestigious awards as a journalist in Israel, including Israel's top prize in journalism. And he spoke at a Israeli lobby meeting here in the United States not too long ago. And he had some tremendous things to say. Again, this is an Israeli journalist. But I'll just give you one snippet of what he said in that speech. He said, this is a quote, "Most of the Israelis, if not all of them, deeply believe that we are the chosen people. And if we are the chosen people, we have the right to do whatever we want." Close quote. Now, he was not speaking that for himself because he doesn't believe that way. He's very critical of that spirit in Israel, and he writes very boldly in his criticism of that spirit. But he was relaying to the Israeli lobbyists here in the United States what is the sentiment of practically every Israeli, that because they're God's chosen people, they believe they have the right to do whatever they want, which includes mass murdering right now, somewhere around 35,000 people. How many thousands of victims are still buried under the rubble that we don't even know, we can't count. And we've got them all rounded up like cattle in the southern end of Gaza down in Rafah on the border with Egypt. And we're going, and the Israelis, along with the support of Biden and the United States, are going to go into Rafah, and they're going to mop up. What they've been doing is hurting the people of Gaza down into Rafah. Leave this area because we're gonna destroy it, and so they leave. And of course, a lot of times they're bombed anyway, but they leave, and so they leave, and they keep going down to other locations and going down to other locations, and finally now they've got them all down in Rafah.
They pushed them into the kill
zone. And so you've got about a million people down there crammed, not just one little community called Gaza, that one little strip, but you've got them down there in one border town next to Egypt. Can you imagine just having that many bodies without water, without nourishment, without medical supplies? Think of what that would look like. Think what that would sound like. Think what that would smell like if you were there. And Netanyahu has said he's going in to Rafah. He wants to genocide the entire Gaza Strip. Egypt is on alert now. They're ready to go to war with Israel. If this thing spreads from Rafah into anywhere near into Egypt, Egypt's going to defend their border, unlike the United States. You've got Lebanon threatening war with Syria because their IDF forces are fighting in Lebanon now as well. You've got Syria threatening to go to war. You've got Iran threatening to go to war. You've got Iraq threatening to go to war. You've got Turkey. Erdogan is calling Netanyahu Hitler, and Turkey is a major military power. They got 2 million soldiers. These are not militia. These are regular trained soldiers. And of course, Pakistan is a nuclear power. I mean, the combined forces of the Arab world around Israel have the capability, if they ever decided to unite and go to war, I mean real war against Israel, they could wipe Israel off the map.
But Israel has nukes, and DNA-specific biological warfare viruses, and that's what holds them back.
Sure, of course, and then there's the United States sitting out there, say what would we do? So that all those things are holding back. But the point is, we don't know the future on this, and this is a potential deal breaker when you've got countries like Turkey and even Saudi Arabia, which was on the verge of signing a peace agreement and a trade agreement and a goodwill agreement with Russia just shortly before all this happened in the beginning of October. Now even Saudi Arabia is talking about war with Israel. The point is this could escalate into a regional conflict, which would make it global, because you've got the Western and Eastern forces behind all these countries sitting out there.
All right, Chuck, I'm going to take...
All because Netanyahu thinks that he is the forerunner of the Messiah. He's been told this by rabbis, that he is going to give the keys of the kingdom to the Messiah. That Netanyahu is the forerunner of Messiah. And that Messiah is going to come and Netanyahu is going to give the keys of the kingdom to Messiah. It can't talk about that without laughing. The lunacy of this. But
I
let's
call him,
go back.
Yeah, I call him Herod Netanyahu the Great, because he is a new name. Herod, and he's mad. Herod was mad, and this guy's mad. He's insane.
Yeah, he's demon possessed.
Hey, I'll just
say it straight out. He's demon possessed.
Pastor Chuck, I want to take a break. I've got to take a break for our sponsor, American Reserves, and then when we come back, I want to pick up this conversation about what is happening in the Middle East, and I got a question I want to ask you. So we'll be back in 1 minute after this message from American Reserves.
I'm Jake, but my friends call me Moose Jaw. I'm a blacksmith, and I like to work with my hands. I watch TruNews, and it's apparent to me that we are in World War III, and the U.S. is very unstable. I have faith in God, but He expects us to use our brains and our hands to prepare for troubled times. There are two things we need: food and water. That's why I buy my supplies from AmericanReserves.com.
American Reserves offers easy-to-prepare chicken and beef meals, pastas, soups, and vegetables that only need boiling water. You can purchase the world-famous British Berkfield gravity-fed water filters equipped with Dolton ceramic handles and other emergency supplies at AmericanReserves.com.
My family's security is critical to me. Something big is coming. Procrastination could be costly. Act today before a crisis suddenly appears. Be ready, be wise, go to AmericanReserves.com.
Hey, and American Reserves has a special offer for TruNews fans and nobody else if you will enter into the promo code box TruNews. Where it asks for a promo code, just type in TruNews. They will take 15% off of your order, and this offer is good for the entire month of February. So AmericanReserves.com, the promo code is TruNews. The discount is 15%. We're talking with Dr. Chuck Baldwin. And Chuck, over the past 5 months since this war started, mid-October, every night when I went home, I would spend about a half hour combing through videos on Twitter, X. I saw images that I've never seen in my entire lifetime, images that I can't get out of my head, images of children that will stay with me until I die, things that I didn't think any humans could do to children. And it appears On the surface, it appears that Netanyahu has gotten away with this, that nobody will hold him accountable. But there is growing opposition around the world. Do you think the Zionists went too far? Did they take their mask off and reveal to the world who and what they are? Can they ever recover from the Palestinian Holocaust?
That's a tremendous question. And I think the answer is yes, they did go too far. And I think the second answer to your question is no, they will not recover. The popular opinion globally has shifted against Israel like never in our lifetime, like never since the end of World War II. There has never been a time when popular opinion worldwide has been as anti-Israel as it is right now. And I want to go back to right before the break. We were talking about the genocide and what Netanyahu is doing, and the fact that they're God's chosen people and therefore they can do anything they want, quoting that Israeli journalist. What is the main impetus for that thinking, that philosophy?
Well, it's Christian Zionism from John Nelson Darby and Cyril Schofield.
That's exactly right. You know that. That's where all of this started. It started with Darby. Schofield was the one that popularized it in the West when, with the Zionist money and Zionist-inspired notes, he published the Schofield Reference Bible, which immediately became the Bible of choice for colleges and seminaries and Bible schools all across the United States. And then Dallas Theological Seminary got a hold of it because Dallas was the headquarters of Schofield for so many years of his life. And the school that he was associated with, which became later Dallas Theological Seminary, which has spread the Zionist agenda throughout evangelicalism ever since. So that 80% of the evangelical churches in America today are Christian Zionists in their theology. Guys like John Hagee and Jeffress and Laurie and all the rest of these guys that are out here on national television telling the American people, and at the same time telling the Israelis themselves, they're God's chosen people, we've got to support them, this is all a part of Bible prophecy, blah, blah, blah. And so they have developed this invincibility spirit. They really do believe it now. We convinced them that they're God's chosen people. And of course, they don't need Jesus. John Hagee made that clear. They don't have to be saved. They have a special covenant with God. They're going to go to heaven regardless. And so there is no accountability. There's no moral consciousness in their minds. I mean, that's why you keep hearing the cabinet of Netanyahu constantly referring to the Palestinian people as human animals. It's because they believe that they are morally superior to every other person on earth. All Gentiles are inferior to them because they're God's chosen people. And it's the evangelicals in America that have sold that to them. Can I read just one thing? I think
Absolutely.
this is so important.
Absolutely. And while you're bringing it up, you remember at the beginning of the war, Netanyahu told the IDF troops that the Palestinians were the Amalekites, and they needed to be wiped out, even down to the infants.
Oh, I wrote on that just recently, and I spoke on that. He said that they're the Amalekites, the Palestinians, and you're right. And he used the example of the Old Testament where God told Moses to wipe out the Amalekites, and he's using that for himself. Think of the blasphemy of this. He is putting himself in the person of Moses. Moses, the man who saw God face to face. Moses, the lawgiver of Israel. Moses, the deliverer of Israel. Moses, the man of God. Only one man could fulfill the role that Moses filled. And here you've got this Antichrist, pagan, demon-possessed individual who puts himself in the position of Moses and declares that under God he has the right to slaughter as many people as he wants to slaughter, and women and children matter not. And how can evangelicals accept this?
Because they don't read the Bible.
Beyond my imagination. There is a Lutheran pastor in Israel, in Bethlehem, actually.
I know him.
His name is Munther Isaac. I'm sure you probably know this name.
I met him. Doc and I met him.
Yes.
Oh, God bless you. You know, I've been to the Middle East, and I'm quite a bit older than Munther, and so I'm sure that's why I didn't meet him.
He's part of the Bethlehem Bible College.
Yes. What a tremendous man. Anyway, he preached a sermon just a few Sundays ago called Christ in the Rubble. And let me just read an excerpt of that message. It's brief. It won't take long, so the listeners don't need to think that they'll be bored. Here's what Munther said. Gaza today has become the moral compass of the world. Gaza was hell before October 7th, and the world was silent. Should we be surprised at their silence now? If you are not appalled by what is happening in Gaza, if you are not shaken to your core, there is something wrong with your humanity. If we as Christians are not outraged by the genocide, by the weaponization of the Bible to justify it, there is something wrong with our Christian witness, and we are compromising the credibility of our gospel message. If you fail to call this a genocide, it is on you. It is a sin and a darkness you willingly embrace. Some have not even called for a ceasefire. I'm talking about churches. I feel sorry for you. We will be okay. Despite the immense blow we have endured, we, the Palestinians, will recover. We will rise. We will stand up again from the midst of destruction, as we always have done as Palestinians. Although this is by far maybe the biggest blow we've received in a long time, but we will be okay. But for those who are complicit, I feel sorry for you. Will you ever recover from this? Close quote. Will you, the evangelicals who have endorsed and embraced and looked the other way, will you ever recover from this? You asked me earlier, will Israel ever recover? And I say the answer is no, they will never recover. The ramifications against Israel for this is going to last for decades.
I agree.
I think the bigger question is, will the evangelical Christians who have endorsed and supported and looked the other way, will they ever recover from this?
Chuck, Chuck, we are one global calamity away from the end of the rapture doctrine.
Amen to that.
It's all it's going to take. One global calamity, and the rapture doctrine will go up in smoke with it.
Amen, brother. You're exactly right.
Because once it happens, you're not going to be able to sell that phony doctrine to anybody. And that's what's on the horizon. And I think the evangelical church world is teetering on collapse also. One good sign, I saw an article a few days ago in an Israeli paper where an Israeli researcher warned the Zionist leaders of Israel that support for Israel was dropping fast in America's young evangelical Christians. That among young evangelicals in the United States, support for Israel has dropped 50% in the last 3 years.
Oh, that's tremendous.
That shows, Chuck, that guys like you and me are having an impact. Sometimes we think maybe not too many people are listening, but the truth is they are.
They are, and I can tell you, and I know you've seen this too, since the October War began, viewership on my broadcast has quadrupled or more. And I'm sure you've seen the same thing with TruNews. That people they know they're being lied to. They know that the mainstream media cannot be trusted. It's not making sense. They go to churches in their neighborhoods and they're hearing the pastors get up and rah for Israel and pray for Israel and pray for Netanyahu and all this. And in their spirit, they know there's something wrong with it. They may not know doctrinally exactly what it is because they haven't been taught anything except Christian Zionism, so they don't know anything different. Right. But in their spirit, the Holy Spirit is convicting them that this is not of God and that this is not right. And so they are beginning to search for themselves for the truth. And then they come across TruNews, they come across Liberty Fellowship, they come across the messages and the videos and the DVDs and everything, and they start absorbing it, ravenously because they can't get enough. And they're learning and they're growing, and now they see the truth. So I know that's happening because in my small world, which is on the big scale, just a small part of what God is doing, but in my little corner of God's vineyard, I can see the reaction of people to the truth is growing exponentially. And I knew that the younger generation generally has adopted an anti-Israel philosophy on the secular level. Like you go to any of the secular colleges and universities, and the vast majority of the kids there are not pro-Israel. They're very much anti-Israel.
I'll tell you another piece of good news. Viewership for the evangelical television networks is down substantially.
Is that a fact?
It is. I've heard some numbers from people inside the industry that I just, do a double take when they tell me how few people are watching certain networks at a particular hour. I mean, we're talking about, I'm thinking of one particular network on a primetime night had 12,000 viewers. And
wow.
Chuck, I believe what's happening, it's got to be one of two things, or maybe a combination. These evangelical Christian networks are surviving off the fumes of past financial success. In other words, maybe they're getting endowments, they're getting gifts from wills of people who've passed away.
Legacy
donors. But the other possibility is that there's money laundering going on. And that Zionists are secretly propping up the evangelical television networks? Because
I think the Zionists have been supporting the major televangelists for decades.
I do too, because it doesn't make sense when you look at. Well, I'll give you an example. If you go to all the major Christian Zionists and you look at their Twitter accounts, there's hardly anybody following them.
Right. You may have maybe a few dozen reposts of a tweet or something like that.
I mean, they might have 300 or 400 views of a tweet.
And these are prominent names.
Big names.
Yes.
It's like, where's all the support? I think it's phony. I think they're propped up. I think there's hidden money that's bankrolling these Christian TV networks.
It's from Israel. You know, I Jerry Falwell was my mentor. You know that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a graduate of Liberty University. And I was with Jerry during the moral majority days. I'm old enough that I go back quite a ways.
I had a Jesus first pin.
I was pardon?
I wore a Jesus first pin.
I had one too.
Yeah.
I even got the big moral majority notebook.
Half the country wore the Jesus first pin. I saw politicians in Tallahassee wear the Jesus first pin when I was in the moral majority in Florida. I was executive director of the Florida moral majority back in those days. And I got to know Jerry very well. He spoke at my church in Florida. I pastored there for over 30 years in the Panhandle. And he was a guest speaker at my church 4 times, if I count correctly. I was a guest on his Old Time Gospel Hour television program. He wrote me up in the Liberty Journal that he published. I flew with him on his jet airplane around the country.
Is that the one that came from Israel?
Well, that was you've jumped to my punchline.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Chuck.
Yeah, I didn't. Back in those days, I didn't even know what Zionism was. You know, in most of the graduates of these evangelical colleges and universities, they're taught it in a way that they don't even understand the Zionistic part of it. I never heard the word. I graduated from 2 Bible colleges and never heard the word Zionist until I was with Jerry Falwell in Washington, D.C. for a press conference. And I was I was the young kid on the block, all the other guys, they were the speakers and the movers and shakers, and Jerry and other of the leadership were on a platform, and the rest of us were in the audience, and the national news media was asking questions, and they asked Jerry the question, and the question was, Jerry, don't give him a long answer, just in one word, are you a Zionist? That's the first time I ever heard the word. And, it's funny, I'm about 28, 29 years old at that time, and I'm sitting out there, and in my heart, you know how your mind thinks faster than the voice can talk, and in my mind, as soon as the question was asked, and even though I didn't know what it was, I said to myself, no. That was just instinctive. I didn't know what it was, but no, I'm not a Zionist. And as soon as I thought that, I heard Jerry say very strongly and emphatically, yes. So I just deferred. Well, I'm a youngster. I don't know what I'm doing. And he's Jerry, and he knows, so I just dropped it in my mind. But that was the first time I heard about it. But everywhere in the country, they're taught this Israel first prophecy theology. And, of course, we now know it as Zionism. And at the time, I hadn't heard the word, but I knew there was something wrong with it. So I'm flying around with Jerry in this jet, and I can't prove this. Then later, you're right. Then later, I discovered, long after the days of moral majority, and after I began studying and learning the truth, then I found out that jet airplane that I flew in, and Jerry was Jerry's plane. He owned it, but it was given to him by the state of Israel. And so if that was true for Jerry, and I know that it was for him, then what about John Hagee? What about Robert Jeffress? What about Greg Laurie? What about these guys that are out there promoting Israel, 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 Israel all the time, constantly, nonstop? In my heart of hearts, I know that the resources, the funding for all of this, that is, for the most part, is coming from the Israeli lobbyists and the conduits from Israel that are funneling all the support to these people. There's no doubt in my mind about that.
Chuck, I have a feeling, it's just my gut feeling. I have a feeling that the Israelis, when they gave the jet to Jerry Falwell back in the 80s?
Yes, that would have been the 80s.
I think it was an experiment. I think they were shocked at how much mileage they got out of that gift. And then they realized, hey, wait a minute. If we have a deliberate plan to reward these preachers
for promoting Israel.
And then it got to the point they didn't even have to give them anything. They just started, the preachers started fawning over them. And that's where we're at now. I don't think the Israelis have to give them anything. They're bought off. They're in. They're hardcore Zionists now. And they've sold out the church. They've sold out Jesus Christ. And I think Ichabod is written on their church doors. It's the glory is departed. It's
Amen.
The real church is alive and well. There is a real church, and it doesn't compromise. And it will go through the fire, and it will go through the persecution, the tribulations, everything that has been foretold. We will go through these things and remain true to Christ. I'm not trying to figure out anything other than just every day live for Him, be obedient, be faithful, and obey Him for one day. And tomorrow I'll do it again.
That's what He told us to do.
That's all we're supposed to do.
And that's what He told us to do.
One day at a
Occupy
time.
until I come.
Chuck,
Occupy until I come.
Chuck, I've got 1 minute. I got 1 minute. I'll let you get the last word in the next 60 seconds.
Okay. Well, first, I just want to say thank you very much for letting me be on TruNews again, and thank you guys for what you're doing every day and standing for the truth on this subject, because it's absolutely making a difference. And I think that discussions like we've had today are being discussed on coffee tables and restaurants and living rooms and all across the United States. I think a lot of Christian people are beginning to wake up. Like you said, the true church is arising. It is live. It is well. And it's not inside the establishment church for the most part anymore. It is on its own that's the way it began. And I think that's the way it's going back. It's going back to its roots. I think Christianity is going back to its roots. And the commercialization and the big churchianity that we've experienced over the last several decades is collapsing.
Yes.
And the truth is rising. So I'm not discouraged by any stretch of the imagination, and I don't think anybody should be. God's in control of all of this. The truth is shining very brightly, and I think it's going to shine brighter and brighter each day.
Amen. The Reformation needs reformed. That's where we're at right now. So, hey, my guest, Dr. Chuck Baldwin, his website, chuckbaldwinlive.com, and the church, libertyfellowshipmt.com. Check it out. Watch the sermons. We'll be back in a moment with Morning Manna.
You're listening to